Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cup Reviews, brought to you by Cup of Hemlock Theatre. I am your host and marketing manager, Mackenzie, and we are continuing this episode with our month of Kevin Kline. And joining me tonight, we have a fantastic panel. We have returning to us, Miss Bridget Wilson. Hello, Bridget.
Hello. Why are we doing British accents?
I know we should be doing French accents, you know.
Or just to yourself. Either.
Hey, everybody. Hey, from Stratford, Ontario.
But welcome back, Bridget. It's so great to have
Thank
you joining us for another review. Well, Bridget, what is your ensemble tonight, and what is in your cup?
Funny you should ask. I just happen to have a little panache myself.
Oh.
Love it, love it, love it, love it.
That's kind of it.
Very
in my
serious.
cup, Cup of Hemlock,
Ooh.
I have my go-to special wine this evening.
Nice.
And it is a Sancerre, which is French.
Mm-hmm.
It's a white wine. And I'll just tell you a little bit about it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, here's the bottle in case you want to know.
Nice bottle.
It says that this wine is an excellent companion for seafood and white meat and Cup of Hemlock.
Well,
That's
there
what's
you
in my
go.
cup.
Beautiful.
Love that.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Or salute.
Cheers.
Or
Salute.
whatever.
Yep.
Wait, we all have the same mug, everyone.
What?
I
What's going
know
on
we
here?
do. What? Oh, sorry.
How
My
is
mug
this a thing?
There we go. I'm left-handed, so I pick it up in the other opposite hand. But yes, and I mean, also joining us, we have returning after a long absence, somebody who we've truly missed on these reviews, our general assistant, our friend of the cup, Ms. Jillian Robinson. Hello, Jill. Welcome
Hey,
back.
Mac. Thanks. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah. Long time no see, been off busy doing all types of fun international theater projects.
Yeah.
And now you're back.
Amazing. Yes. I'm so thanks for having me back. I'm excited to
Thank you for joining us for another fun round. What
got
is
it.
your ensemble tonight, and what is in your
Right. So
cup?
it's been so long. So I found it so fun kind of going around the house and putting together an ensemble and a drink. So my shirt is, you can't really tell, but there's kind of some like ruffly business happening down here. And then it just gave me sort of like the era of the play, or like the vibe of the play, just this tone and pattern. So that's why I went with that. And then my earrings, they kind of could be little like pendants or little like stamps, right? There's lots
They
of
kind of
letters
like the
written in
Jennifer
this
Garner
play.
earrings that she wears.
Beautiful. Yep.
They kind of look like AirPods.
Happy accident. Well, yeah, that too. Ha ha ha. So my drink is called the Roxanne. It is an actual drink, right?
That's so cool.
So I had to modify it. So I'll tell you what it actually is and then how I modified. So what it should be is vodka, peach schnapps, amaretto, orange juice, and cranberry juice. But I had to pandemicify the drink because I didn't have all the ingredients. So there is vodka, there is amaretto, there's cranberry juice, but I used triple sec instead of the peach schnapps and the orange juice. So that is what I'm sipping on. It's quite tart, but it's delicious. Like it's a nice little Friday night treat.
Bittersweet taste of lost love, perhaps.
Exactly.
Well, you really brought it, I must say.
Thank you. And then my water in my Cup of Hemlock mug.
Yes.
Right.
And we have my co-producer of all things The Cup, our literary manager, our resident dramaturg, Mr. Ryan Borochovitz. Hello, Ryan. What is in your cup, and what is it your ensemble tonight?
Okay, so my ensemble. So it's funny. I rarely plan anything special ensemble-wise. I'm like, it has buttons, it has a color, it's a shirt, whatever. 2 episodes ago, I wore a flannel shirt, and that apparently got a laugh, I guess, because last episode, Mac made a big thing about how, you're not wearing a flannel shirt this time? So this time, I am wearing a flannel shirt once again. Are you happy?
I am very happy. We're matching colors tonight. We got the black and white color scheme going.
I guess yours kind of looks a lot more similar to Jill's than it does to mine.
Yes, well, mine is a little bit more, it's all black and white flower patterns. And I felt that was a very French Cyrano thing. It also matched kind of the embroidery or weaving that Roxanne was doing at the end at the loom. So I was like, okay, that works. That works. So that's my ensemble tonight. And Ryan, what are you drinking?
So I have in the cup. Ooh, we're all matching there. I just have orange pico tea, so nothing too exciting. The classic.
That's okay. I'm going with my classic Earl Grey tea with a hint of honey. So there we go. And I mean, I'm also having the cup too. So the show we are doing as we continue our month of Kevin Kline, thanks to BroadwayHD, is we are talking about the 2007 Broadway revival production of Cyrano de Bergerac, which starred Kevin Kline as Cyrano, Jennifer Garner as his cousin Roxanne, Daniel Sonjata as Christian, and Chris Sarandon as Duguay. So that is the show we are talking about. And this production was directed by the director, whose name is David Leveaux, French name. So there we go. A lot of French in this tonight. So that is what we're talking about tonight. And to kind of kick this off, we are going to first kind of talk about our thoughts about Mr. Kevin Kline in the titular role of Cyrano de Bergerac. So, Bridget, as you had told me in your email, you've seen quite a few Cyranos. How does Mr. Kevin Kline rank in your Cyrano ranking?
I wasn't sure when I first started watching it what I really felt. He won me over in the balcony scene, and I suppose that is the scene that will either make or break your Cyrano. What's interesting to me, the two Cyranos that I've seen were very different. The actors were known for different things. So when I did my first professional gig at the Shaw Festival in 1983, Heath Lamberts was doing his Cyrano for the second time with Marty Meriden as Roxanne.
Okay.
And I kick myself for this now, but I did not see it until the end of the season. And I went in for free and sat on the stairs, as young actors do, way up in the balcony. And I was gobsmacked, right? I was just stunned by the production. It was beautiful. And I was sorry because it was the closing, and so I never got to see it again. And he had already done it the season before. But Heath was a brilliant comedian, and he died shortly after that. But that was the only time I probably saw him do anything other than what he did that season. But he was known for comedy. He was a clown character. He was as wide as he was tall. He was spherical, as Shakespeare would say, but just a brilliant comic. And then I didn't see another production until the Stratford Festival with Colm Feore. And by this time, it was Colm's second time at Cyrano. And Donna Feore directed it. And Colm is obviously can do anything. But it was a different Cyrano in that it was more about the language. You got more of the poet, and you had Colm's mental agility. So it was a very different Cyrano. So I'd seen these two beautiful actors doing this iconic part, and then I really have never formed an opinion about Kevin Kline, to be honest with you. And so when I started to watch it, I thought, oh God, no, oh no, I can't, because for me, he was neither Heath nor Colm. But what I came to love about his Cyrano was his vulnerability, which I really had never factored in before. And I know we were watching a filmed version of stage play. He would have been aware, they would have all been aware the cameras were on them. I know that because things happen in filming of stuff after the fact. But his absolute connection to that part and his willingness to go there as an actor and his vulnerability just won me. So I think he's so versatile. I don't know what I expected, but I really, really loved it. I watched it all again today. I just thought he embodied the part beautifully.
Yeah. Agreed. I mean, I also saw the Comfior version as well back in 2009, and I loved his Cyrano. I thought he was a beautiful Cyrano, but because it actually incorporated French into the script, and it was in the letters, and because I don't speak French, my friend who was at the Stratford Station School with me, so there he is weeping next to me, and I'm sitting there going, am I missing something? Like, I'm totally emotionally. So that's the one thing I was sad about that production, was I just couldn't emotionally get as invested. But Combs, Cyrano was, as you said, very witty. Like, he had a very he was as witty with his rapier as he was with his words, and I think that was a beautiful production there. I still remember the set having that bit of the ripped letter along the top of the festival stage that they could project bits of the letter on, which was really kind of a neat effect. So I do remember that. But yeah, definitely I remember Comfior's Cyrano. That was a great season that was done there. That was the season of West Side Story and Funny Thing. Like, just looking back at that was a great season. That was a really solid season of work that the Stratford Festival produced. Kevin Kline's, though, I liked it. I really did. I thought he was the standout of this production by far. He held it all together. Like, he was the reason to watch this piece right from the minute he starts in the audience up on the balcony or the booth, I guess, and then jumping down onto the stage. Like, I totally forgot he was 60 when he did this performance. Like, he didn't come across as 60, or at least not physically anyway. He definitely had that agility to him there that I was like, oh yeah, I can see that he would maybe be somewhere in his 50s if he was. It's like, oh no, he's actually 60. So very good there. However, similar to my thing I had said about Christopher Plummer and Caesar, which I know Ryan's eyebrows already going up. I do think he was a little too old for Cyrano because of Jennifer Garner. Jennifer Garner was like 35 when she did this, and you have someone who's 60, so a 30-year age gap kind of killed the romance for me between the two of them. Like, I just couldn't see them as a couple because of how big that age gap was, which kind of, like, Calvin Kline was emoting his heart out. Like, the tears he cried throughout this was heartbreaking, but I was just like, I can't see these two as a couple. There just wasn't that connection. It felt more paternal than it did romantic. So I think that was my one flaw with this performance, was he was a little bit too old. Like if he actually was, because don't forget, we're seeing this character over a large gap of time. Like, I think what's the last time gap? It's like 15 years she's been in the convent, something like that. So like Cyrano should be younger when he starts, like more closer to Christian's age as a viable rival for Roxanne, and then he ages up as time goes on. But this Cyrano, he's already felt a bit more paternal than he did romantic. So still great, but just didn't quite hit the way I think you want your Cyrano to hit. Ryan's making faces at me.
Well, no, but you brought it up in terms of the comparison being drawn here to Caesar and Cleopatra, which we discussed a couple episodes ago, and whether or not Plummer was too old to play that role. See, I'm not going to put up the same fight that I did there, because that, like, your folly in that argument was that you were harping on the fact that Julius Caesar, the historical figure, never lived to that age, but Shaw wrote a play about an elderly, near the grave Caesar. So history be damned, like, doesn't really have any bearing on the play that we were working with there, which is why I thought your taking issue with that was kind of ill-conceived. here I do understand the point you're making about it definitely did have a bit of a paternal vibe to this relationship, and that can, in a way, certainly seems like an obstacle to them being romantically viable to each other. Hey, wait a minute. Obstacle to them being romantically viable with each other. Maybe that's kind of part of the point that, or like, I don't know. I don't want to necessarily say that. Yeah, I'm not saying I would be against a version that kind of ages him down a bit and makes him like more on like similar footing. If it weren't for that nose, that he and Christian would be very similar in terms of prospects. But like you kind of said from the beginning, wow, Kevin Kline really seemed younger than he was and was so agile and sprightly in it that I didn't find it was distractingly too big of an age gap.
Yeah, it wasn't distractingly, but I was noticing. It was always there mentally for me that like there is a bigger age gap than the brunette wig may imply, as someone in his 60s versus somebody in their 30s. So
yeah. Anyway, this to me has very little bearing on my appreciation for him in the role. Mm-hmm. Like I'm just more responding since you sucked me into your argument there. Like to me, like, I mentioned this in the last episode, big Kevin Kline fan, love him and kind of everything he does. And this is no exception. Mm-hmm. Like I didn't even have to wait until the balcony scene for him to really win me over. He won me over the second we saw him on the balcony. The audience started applauding and he put out his hand. No, stop. I have my scene to do. And like you're right out there, just his like perfect wit and charm is just so palpable in everything he does. And then, he steals the show, which is, I think, what makes him perfect for the role of Cyrano, someone who is stealing the show in his own life. Mm-hmm. Like I'm going to talk about this probably a little more in a future question, but in any other play, aside from Cyrano or most other plays, or certainly plays that predate this one, Cyrano would be the sidekick. He wouldn't be the protagonist of the story. Like we have our like pair of lovers who most of the action would be around it. He'd be like the conniving servant character who helps grease the wheels to getting them together. But this play, Cyrano de Bergerac, is all about what if that character was the most interesting person in the room? And he steals the show of that otherwise sort of standard romance story, and putting someone like Kevin Kline, who just can't help but steal the show and everything he does, really is just the perfect embodiment of that. So I loved him in it. I do think he is the reason to watch this production. And I don't know what more to say about it. He's great.
Yeah. Jill, what are your thoughts? We've thrown a lot of things out there.
Yeah, it's an interesting segue just to kind of pick up where Ryan left off. I actually don't think Kevin Kline steals the show in anything he is, and I think that's what makes him a brilliant actor. He's so underrated, in my opinion. Like, he is, and I don't mean, like, doesn't steal the show as in, like, he's not, he is the best actor in everything that he's in, but he just has such a gravitas and, like, humbling factor about him that, like, he doesn't do it as like, oh, I'm Kevin Kline. Like, even just kind of recalling some of his old movies and stuff like that. I was like, oh, right, that was Kevin Kline. And I'm like obsessed with that movie, but I didn't remember that it was him, right? So he, to me, is an actor that just, like, he oozes passion and compassion for those that are on stage with him. And I absolutely saw that as his Cyrano. And this was my first sort of intro to anything Cyrano de Bergerac. And I'm so glad I was asked to come on this panel, because it's one of those pieces that has been on my radar of like, this needs to be in my repertoire. I just like haven't had the time to fit it in. So I'm so pleased that this is my intro of it, because I was just enthralled by his whole performance. And I think another reason why instantly in that first scene I was captivated is because, again, he is the type of actor that, how do I say this? It's like he is the actor playing the role. It's not like the actor putting on a role, right? Like, it's just Kevin Kline as Cyrano versus like Kevin Kline playing Cyrano. And I think like you get that in the first scene in all the sort of like the physicality, right, in the fight scene, but also like in his sort of tete-a-tete he has with all of the other men on stage, and how he owns the space, like physically, emotionally, and verbally. He just like owns the space, and it's not that like, oh, look at this Cyrano. It's like, no, look at Kevin Kline just being himself in the role. Like there was just like such a natural prowess to it, and that's why I actually don't think, I think because of that sort of confidence he blasts onto the stage in First Sight, I wasn't taken with the age gap thing. Like you said, Mac, when you said he was 60, that shocked me, because that didn't come into play at all. I think I also think it would have been quite common back then, especially if they're related, that there would be an age gap, right, of some sort, whether it be that big or not. So yeah, and then when he climbs the tree halfway through the performance too, I'm like, okay, yeah, I don't care how old you are, you're just great. But I will agree with Bridget too, the balcony scene, and as Bridget was saying too, them this sort of being filmed, and they would have known that his emotional sort of takes and moments were, even though they were staged per se, right, they were so authentic. Like, you know, it's like you actually are shedding that tear. You're not just doing that for the camera, right? So yes, I think this is. I'm so glad that this is my first Cyrano.
Yeah. Now, one thing, Ryan, you had said that you'd seen Cyrano, but an entirely French version.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So how was that Cyrano compared to Kevin Kline?
So I saw because I took French immersion in elementary and high school. And in, I want to say grade 10 it was, we didn't like study Cyrano. I'm not even sure why we necessarily watched it. It was probably just the teacher was hungover or something, but you know, public school. But yeah, I watched a 1990 French film starring, I can never pronounce this actor's name, so I wrote it down, Gerard Depardieu or Depardieu.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, famous French
I
actor.
know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah, no, very talented actor, really like fit the role. I feel like I didn't get as much out of it as I could have, just because my French, both then and now, was not very strong. A French immersion doesn't, you know, like necessarily in Ontario public schools, at least, doesn't really teach you very much of it enough to fully. Yeah, but he's certainly another actor, very charismatic, very like fitting for the role. But I think I certainly enjoyed watching this production more. I also, I don't know, I'm older now. Greater appreciation for the art of theater than I did back then. I don't know.
Yeah.
But also, like, yeah, I'm a pretty easy lay for Kevin Kline. Like, what can I say? Like,
I think it is just one of those parts that men want to play.
Yeah, but also, like, if you think others like Hamlet, there is a bit of a shelf life for how old you can be before you're no longer viable to play it, at least in the eyes of most. Yeah. So I do think Cyrano kind of, while Mac, you may have taken issue with the age gap between him and Roxanne, I don't think it has that same, you gotta play it before you're 40 or there's no point. Like,
yeah, I definitely think like Cyrano has a good like 30 years, like between 30 and 60, I would say is a good age range that you could probably find a Cyrano. Preferably if I was casting it, I would err on the younger side just to give Christian a bit more of a run for his money. So like physically wise, but like Kevin Kline, like he was just so good. Like just look at him behind me. Like just look at that cheeky smile he's giving. Like
that smile.
Yeah.
Like he's totally like winning the scene. Like this is the famous duel between in the opening there, so you can see him counting before he stabs the nobleman there. But like it's just so great. Like just looking at him, like you can't go wrong. Like he's Kevin Kline.
The text in this piece seems quite universal. Like I think that's a reason why, Bridget, like you're saying, like you know, men would want to play it like notch in your belt, but also like you've seen different versions, right? Or like different sort of swings on certain aspects of the character. And I definitely noticed that watching this, that it's the text itself is very freeing, is very universal. And like you can put as little or as much as you want on it, or like swing it this way or that way, I think. And I think it just like, as an actor, that's just a wonderful textual playground to kind of start with, right? And I think that's how this character obviously can be done various different ways. And then we even see like Kevin Kline's performance in particular, like he uses the text to sort of make a joke in the text, like even though it is a joke, like, do you know what I mean? Like he plays with the text, or the text kind of like takes over him. And I think it's because from the get-go, the text off the page is just like an actor's playground, very much so in maybe arguably like other pieces where maybe other more known pieces are kind of like unfortunately packed into a known box, right? Where it's been done several times this way and sort of it's kind of connotated a certain way. Again, this is the first time I've seen it, so maybe I'm coming at this with like a naive approach, but the text itself just seemed like a bit of a playground, which was
it's very Shakespearean, where there's so much layers, like it's like watching different Prosperos, like when somebody plays Prospero, they can choose which elements of the character they want to up, and then other elements they maybe want to play down a bit. Like there's a lot of play in that text that you can make, so you have all these different interpretations. Like as Bridget beautifully described, each of her different Cyranos that she's seen had a certain element to them that made their Cyrano unique. And I think that's what's great about this text, is that it definitely gives the actor playing Cyrano a lot to choose and make choices with. Well, I mean, we've sung the praises of Mr. Kevin Kline, but he wasn't the only person in this production.
He wasn't?
No, it actually was, as we said, there was quite a few other big names that were joining him on stage. So Jill, who would you say is the other character that was best performed?
This one was hard because I'm going to be honest, Kevin had a really high bar. I think ensemble wise, like everyone was great, but I didn't really have someone like as favored as Kevin Kline, although I have like a highlight, and I think it's more so because of this actor's energy. I think I'm pronouncing the character's name right, but Regnault, was it the baker?
Yeah,
that's the baker, right? Okay. I liked him.
He was played by Max Baker, so that's
Max
fun.
Baker. I know. Yeah, looking that up, I was like, how punny is that? I just liked his ethos and his energy. I think he just was one of those actors that anytime he's on stage, your eyes just kind of go to him. Even when he comes to meet them at the battlefield, right? Like all the men kind of circle around him, and he's got the goods, but like he doesn't just have the food goods. Like you can tell he's like a magnet, right? Like, and he's also like their buddy and source of food for all the days. So, he just, I don't know. He was just that actor who's just like a lantern on stage, and kind of keeps the energy up. Especially with these like thicker texted pieces, someone who can just like physically and kind of energetically put that spark into the mix, I think helps, goes a long way. And drives kind of like the subtextual, or not subtextual, like the side plots, or like he's kind of like the glue piecing together the main plot, right? Like the main plot we're dealing with, but also just like the atmosphere that they're in, if that makes any sense. Yeah. So Max Baker as Regnault is my shout out.
Okay.
Character performed, yeah.
I wouldn't have thought of him, but like that's great. Bridget, who is your secondary shout out?
Is it bad to say nobody?
No, this is honest. We're honest.
I'm going to support Jill in saying that Regnault is a great part too. But in Stratford, it was played by my dear friend Steve Ross, and I don't think I'll ever see another Regnault like that again. There's something about a large man playing a baker which made sense for me. But these scrawny little guys, I wasn't buying it for a minute. But the two energies that I appreciated, and I won't remember the names, or the actor or the characters, was the friend at the end that comes into before Ragueneau shows up, the sidekick of Cyrano's that is talking to the nasty guy.
Guy?
But the friend.
Okay.
I want to say Lebray.
Lebray.
Is
Hold
it
on.
Lebray? I loved his simplicity, just his honest to goodness, good loyal friend. And then also, and I never noticed the lines of I want to say the general, although that's probably not the rank he was, where he says
the captain.
Yeah, is he the captain when he says, I pay my men out of my own pocket. Just the he didn't have, he had the panache, he had all of that. He isn't like pointing the light at yourself. It's just being a hero. He just knew what he had to do, and he did it. I love the honesty and energy of those two actors, who were not competing with Cyrano, but were very important to his story.
So I found it. It was John Douglas Thompson as Lebray.
Lebray. I really liked his performance, and also the other gentleman that ran the army.
Was that
Peter J. Fernandez, as Captain
Carbon de Castel-Jaloux.
Correct.
I guess that we can go into this, but I think what it was uneven. I felt like, we know you're on Broadway, and why are the leads doing what I would consider a mid-Atlantic accent, and why are there actors doing British accents? We're not in Britain. We're not. The play doesn't take place in Britain, unless you're British. But have you not learned how not to do your British accent? That was confusing to me. It confused the narrative for me, because I couldn't tell where the hell I was, even though I knew I was in France at 1640 and I was watching a Broadway production. So I guess what I liked about those two gentlemen's performance was it wasn't put on. It was, they were speaking in their authentic voices, and they just told the story. So
Brian, who was your secondary cast shout out?
So I'm going to pick a little bit of an unconventional one. The actor's name is Ewan Morton, and he played the character, I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation, Lignier. He's the poet at the beginning who's delivering all that juicy exposition, and who Cyrano rises up to defend in that big fight that we hear about how cool it was, but don't actually get to see between the acts. Something about him kind of caught my attention right out of the gate early on. Perhaps it's because most of his big moments happen before Kevin Kline shows up, so the show has not been stolen yet. But yeah, he's there. He's very just functional. He doesn't really show up a lot, or maybe even at all, after the first act, and he's kind of just gone from the story. But he's really charming. His job is to let me tell you, Christian, everything about Cyrano before you meet him, and he does it in a way that doesn't feel like the text is clunky exposition, but he delivered it in a way that felt kind of effortless, which I appreciated. He had a few pretty sly, funny moments, like with the milkmaid, and he's like, "Sorry, I've been weaned already," and yeah, he was fun. And because, as we'll get into soon, there weren't a lot of standouts in this cast for me, I thought maybe he was one that deserved one easy to overlook, who deserved a bit of a shout out there.
Yes. Well, I mean, I will say for me, my secondary shout out is Chris Sarandon as Diggy, or as Bridget now refers to him as DeGray, which I really appreciate after that interesting wig that we'll get into later on that he's wearing at the end. But I did love his performance. It was very clear he was putting on his fake British Prince Humperdinck accent from Princess Bride, that love her as I loved her. like that very type of big, like very big, almost fake Britishy voice, that type of thing that he was doing. Like, he was very much channeling Prince Humperdinck again, which to me, as it is one of my favorite movies. And if you were in my room right now, you could see a giant Princess Bride movie poster hanging up on the wall that I got from Queen Street's poster store. Great store, by the way. A plug there for them. But no, like he was just so wonderful as Digi. Like he went from I hate this guy and he's an asshole to Cyrano and everybody to the really funny tree scene between him and Cyrano. Like him and Kevin Kline had such a great like banter between the two of them. Like they're very much, you could tell they were seasoned friends who had grown, because they're both New York actors. They'd all come from that 1970s 80s era of theater in film, like in New York. And they all kind of walk in that same group. I mean, like Christopher Guest, same type of thing. Like it was all that kind of gang. So like they had a great kind of rapport between each other, and he was a great kind of foil to Cyrano. Like the whole scarf scene between the two of them, where it's like, I lost my scarf, and it was a strategic thing, and then out comes Cyrano with, you mean this scarf? That really doesn't look like a scarf. It looks more like a bed sheet, but besides the point. But it's that great thing of like the two of them, like the comedy was there. And that really helped, because like we'll get into the other main coupling of this, and that I have some problems with. But he was lovely as Guy, like, and the fact that he does have that turn at the end of actually caring for Cyrano, and the fact that he's actually warning Lebret about, there are other people in court who really want Cyrano out of the way, so keep an eye out for your friend. Like there was a natural turn of change within these characters that I felt was a nice bit there. So Chris Sarandon, shout out to you. Now we have to get to our favorite production or design element. Ryan, what are your thoughts? What is your shout out for this?
Choreo, obviously. Like the fight scene in Act 1 is just so perfectly orchestrated, and it's such a great character building moment for Cyrano, just how much fun he's having in it, that this isn't I'm so mad I need to fight you, that this is what he lives for, and he's showing off, he's dancing around, and he's making witty jokes. I know that's not necessarily the choreo itself, but it was so perfectly conducted in a way that it was just riveting to watch, because like it was very like flawless, perfectly conducted. But it really just sold the character for me. Not that it needed selling from that moment, but because this is, I made a silly joke earlier about how there was this whole other fight scene that we didn't get to see. And it's kind of easy to forget that there was only one actual staged fight scene in this entire play, and the rest all happen off stage. But that one leaves such an impression that you kind of feel like you've seen all the others. And when they talk about how cool it was that Cyrano fought all these people, you feel like, wow, I wish I could have seen that. But you also think, well, I saw this really cool fight that he did earlier, so I can picture in my mind's eye just that, but with more enemies. And so I thought that was just like such a great, it was a scene-stealing scene in the middle of the opening act that certainly cemented the character and kind of bought a lot of goodwill pretty early on, I must say.
Bridget, how about you? What was your favorite production or design element? Did you even have one with this piece?
Oh, I did. And I have with every Cyrano. The lighting in this one was superb. I thought it was very evocative. And for me, if I'm watching a show that is not holding my attention, the acting or the story, whatever, often it's the lighting that gets me through. I thought it was beautifully lit. I loved the set. I loved how they used that space, how they transformed it and reused elements like the tapestry in the first scene and the second scene. So I thought the set and the lighting were beautiful. Again, the Stratford set was beautiful, as we mentioned. And I remember the first one at Shaw. I don't remember that the set blew me away, but when the leaves started to fall, I started to cry. And every time we get to that scene, the older I get, the sooner I start crying. And I think there's obviously a built-in reason for that that part of the play. I think it actually is a character in the play. I can't imagine anyone not having those leaves fall and understanding, you know, as every decade goes by in my life, what that means. So yeah, for me it was set and lights.
Yeah. Jill, what was your shout out for production or design?
Bridget kind of hit it on the nose. Can I say that for this one? With the set was my favorite. I love pieces that you kind of forget. How do I say this? You forget that, like, if it's actually set or if it's just part of the building itself. So, like, with the cement stairs at the back, with the brick walls, with Cyrano sort of starting out in the box in the balcony. I didn't look further into it because I kind of like the fact of knowing, I don't know if those were just spaces in the theater or if those were like made set pieces. Because I that adds to like meta-ness for me. That might just be like the nerd in me that's like, we're doing theater in a theater, and look at that wall is part of the theater. You know, like theater as a building, theater as a production, theater. Yeah. So so I liked that as the skeleton, and then because it was kind of like the colors were a bit muted except for like the tapestry or like the red leaves falling or costume pieces swirling in and out. It allowed the backdrop to be sort of silent, and then in that way the acting and the story can kind of just live in the space. It wasn't distracting. Even Roxanne's balcony, like I loved that scene was just stripped down. You had like the blue sky, the balcony, and then just the three of them like like vertices on a triangle, and words were spoken, right? And then the tree. So the minimalist natural vibe really hit it home for me. It created the atmosphere that I wanted, especially because like I said, this is my first sort of take or first experience with Cyrano. I liked that I was able to just really hone in on the text and the story, and not be distracted by any other elements. So,
yeah, I mean, the one element that I really liked was the costumes. I liked that they were lived-in costumes, that they weren't just show costumes. Like it looked like, especially for like the gang that Cyrano's with in the bakery. And the baker, like they look sweaty. They didn't look fresh and pressed like Cyrano's does. Like Cyrano's,
he still has hole in his gloves.
He has holes in his gloves. He like there also is this guy here who, like, class wise he would be well dressed, but like you could easily tell this class system within France at this time and the lived in quality of these outfits. They all looked like they'd all kind of been around a bit. They'd be like they been to battle and streets and things like that. It wasn't like the fake poor costumes. Like I remember Jill and I recently watched the stage concert of Les Mis, and the fact that all the poor people come out and they're like one of the cleanest looking bunch of beggars that I've ever seen. Like the costumes are like beautiful, and I'm like, no, like gungy, dirty. These people should have rotten teeth. Like be nasty. Like go for the time. And the fact that a lot of times like Christian's outfits were very kind of pulled together. Like it wasn't that nice neatness about him. He did have that bit of like that rugged quality. And like the baker, like he looks like he'd been baking all day. Like there was sweat and dirt and things all over him. Like he just looked like, it just looked really lived. The world looked lived. It didn't look theater lived. It looked naturally lived. So I enjoyed it. It paired nicely with the set, as Jill said, that naturalistic kind of set. And like Roxanne's costumes, because of her class, they did pop. Even that convent black beautiful gown she wears, it's like only someone of her class would be able to show up at a convent for 15 years and have this beautiful gown that she's in versus like a nunnery outfit. Like gorgeous. So yeah, costumes for me were just well done. Like that lived in quality to them really kind of what sold me on those outfits. Okay, I got a feeling we're gonna have a lot to say about this, but what was the weakest part of the production? Bridget, since you sent me that wonderful emoji in that email, that in our email correspondence about this, I really want to hear about what you thought was the weakest part.
So when I started, because I didn't know, if I wanted to weigh in on this at all, because I have my memories of my Cyranos. And I started, and it was so slow. There were pauses between lines that could have been shared. The cues weren't picked up. It was so slow. And then Kevin Kline showed up in a balcony, and he spoke slowly. I wanted to die. I did not want to like this. I'm surprised I continued. I don't know what the director was thinking. What that indicates to me is the director assumes his audience is stupid, as one of the characters says. That if you're going that slowly, I think it indicates that you think they're not listening, they're not getting it. Most people have seen a Cyrano, or I don't know. It needed to move. It really needed to move. We're talking about meta. We're talking about a theatrical presentation at the beginning of a play. Like, move. Just move. It's a love story about artists, poets. It's a love story to the original Cyrano. I found his coming in from the balcony arbitrary. It didn't serve the story. Maybe, but everyone spoke so slowly in that first scene. I didn't think I was going to make it, and I really don't know what the director was thinking. So I wasn't sure about Kline. I wasn't sure about the production at all, but I decided to stick it through. And honest to God, like I said, when it happened for me was Kline's moments in the balcony scene when he was speaking to her, and he shifted. Cyrano shifted from just being so smart that he could respond in the moment and be a brilliant poet, to actually being the vessel, the loving vessel where the words came out and just spoke to her in the moment. But the weakest for me was the beginning. I really didn't think I was going to do it. I really wasn't sure, Mac, if I was on board. But anyway, I have seen it several times, so that says something. But for me, I think it was just that I blame the director, whether he was lazy or not understanding his audience. I think we have to give our audience more credit.
Yes.
I don't think people come to the theater not knowing anything.
Jill, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, so I stand by Bridget in that I think the direction was poor. Accents were popping in and not sort of feeding into the dramaturgical due diligence of what this piece was. And styles were different, like acting styles were different, right? Like, to me, Garner had such a melodramatic vibe to her Roxanne, whereas Kevin Kline was more like contemporary-esque, which sure, either can work, but not in the same play. And like, I was talking with Ryan about this too. Like, we were going back and forth, and like, is Garner like purposefully doing that? Like, is it like a flair that she's putting on Roxanne, right? Of having to put this on, or is she just like been told to act that role that way, or like,
Or did nobody tell her to do anything?
Exactly.
And that's just what she thinks theater looks like.
Right.
Was my kind of, and I didn't know. Like it could have been any of them, but like it was so hard to tell. Is this even a choice?
So I guess to kind of pigeonhole into sort to augment one thing that really popped out for me was I didn't buy Roxanne and Christian. I didn't buy their relationship at all. And I get that. The whole premise is that, you know, he's only there for like the physicality, right? And like the beautiful woman. Like I get that his character is supposed to be more shallow, surface based, especially in comparison to Cyrano. But I wanted a little bit more depth to him, and I wanted more depth and less like to her, because I think that would have hurt Cyrano even more. For like, as an audience member, I'm watching this, I'm like, Cyrano, like, you're way better than both of these people. Like, they both aren't being themselves, right? In more ways than one. Literally, it's not Christian's voice throughout all of this. It's all piped in through Cyrano, right? And then Roxanne is putting on this, she's dumbstruck. She's wearing rose-colored glasses. It's not she's wearing a mask, right? That's not the true their true selves. But I want it, and I think that's part of their relationship. I think that is part of their role in the piece overall. But I wanted there to be just little tidbit moments of like, oh my gosh, they do actually really love each other, those two. Like Christian and Roxanne are like, oh, there is a little bit of authenticity to challenge Cyrano. Because in my opinion, I was like, Cyrano's love is the most pure. Like, and I get, it's so hard to talk about because I get I'm assuming you're supposed to take that away, right? But I thought they were too surface. They were almost inhuman in some moments. That took away, it distracted from the story, in my opinion. So yeah. That again falls under the same menu as directing and carving out those little moments to have kind of like a jab back at Cyrano. But that just wasn't there. And
I get it, Jill, because that's the same note I had, was the lack of chemistry between these three lovers. Like Kevin Kline is emoting his heart out. Like watching him in the tree talking to Roxanne, you can tell Kevin Kline is genuinely in like giving it to Jennifer Garner, and she is just like, you're right, Jill. There were totally different acting styles that were hitting, and they were totally missing each other, which was too bad because Kevin Kline is doing such a good job, and Jennifer Garner, like we've seen her in movies where she has done good work and good naturalistic work. Like it's not like she's a bad actress. She the reason why she is Jennifer Garner and we know who she is. She does do good work. On film. It's just for this, they were just misfiring, and because they misfire, you can't connect in that romantic way that you'd want. On one hand, I'm rooting because I know I have to root for Roxanne and Cyrano, but it's like it didn't feel like a genuine rooting. It was like, okay, like sure, like I'll root for you because the story tells me to root for you, not because I want to root for you.
Just to go back to Garner's Roxanne arc, like. She, like I said, she was always in rose-colored glasses. She always had that, like, airy naivete about her that at the end scene, when she was all of a sudden smart enough to put the pieces together, that
was her best moment.
No, but I'm saying, like, how did you go, like, where was the build in that, right? It's like
there wasn't a build.
Throughout the arc,
wasn't a build.
Throughout the airiness, throughout the you know the wrapped up in like there had to be moments of like, is this really Christian, right? Or like, or like Cyrano says something to her and she's like, wait. But there wasn't that. There was none of those little nuggets. So when you get to the moment where all of a sudden she's like, it was you this whole time. It's 15 years, and those are your tears on the letter. And then I'm like, whoa, okay, what? Like, how are you? There was just no. It was like from 0 to 100.
Yeah.
There was no arc. There was no little.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. Well, I mean, mind you, I'll say the best part of her was at the end because it felt more natural than oh, melodramatic Gardner that we got a little bit more natural with her at the end there. But overall, like they were just misfiring. And I mean, having seen the 2009 with Comfior, Mike Shira as Christian was so good. I still remember him in that performance because Mike Shira is he's played these Christian type roles before, and I can still remember him doing it, and he was so good in it that I was watching this Daniel guy do it. I was just like, you're just not hitting it for me. I'm not going for you in this. Like, you're just not, like, once again, the lack of chemistry. Jill said, like, as Jill said, there was no genuine connection between her, Roxanne, and Christian. And I agree with you, Jill. A good Christian and Roxanne should challenge Cyrano in some way. There should be a legitimate threat for Cyrano that he has to fight throughout this, which makes him an even more tragic character, that he is willing to wave the white flag for the sake of Roxanne and Christian, because there is some type of genuine match between the two, that he sees, that he's willing to go, I if there's no fight, then why is Cyrano being so nice and giving up when he, versus like, we've all had those relationships where it's like, you would love to be with someone, but you see they're already with someone and they're already genuinely good together. There's that thing of like, okay, I can see that you already have someone who you are connecting with. Like, ain't gonna happen. Like, life, c'est la vie. But there was none of that with these two. And even like between Cyrano and Christian, their weird friendshipy partnership didn't even connect really well. It was like their first scene where, like, after they've done the "and the nose" joke repeatedly. Like, and then after they're supposed to have that, haha, you're my buddy, I'm going to work with you. Like, no connection there. And I was like, oh, that kind of destroys the ending of Christian's character, where he heroically decides, I will die to get out of the way for you. Like, it's like, oh, that's okay. All right, that's happening. Once again, it was more of their whole triangle was more built from plot, where like I knew I had to invest in certain things versus genuinely investing in it because the performances elicited those type of investments. So
I suppose there could be an argument. Again, I don't think the like what we're talking about, the relationship is strong enough to support this argument, but there could be the argument that, you know, the most beautiful people, right, the Roxanne and the Christian, who are physically stunning, are sort of like lesser than personality wise, where then you have your Cyrano with the large nose, right? But he has a world of charisma and like genuine humanity and sort of like having that. But I just think overall, I hope that that's what the director was going for, but I don't think that was,
if he was, it didn't
hit out very well, and it obviously didn't hit. You had to kind of dig to get to that argument, but yeah.
Ryan,
I think we also
Jill, or sorry, Bridget, you go first.
No, I want to hear what Ryan has to say.
I don't even know what there is left to say. We're all kind of, I think, in agreement on the same point of what was weak about this production. Like, to me, the way I put it, or as I described it in my notes, is that nobody else on stage was working at Kevin's level. And I think that is like, it made it hard to pick a secondary cast shout out. Like, they were all doing their own thing, and there was no cohesion among the cast. And yeah, it's just different ways of saying the same thing that we've all been. Like, interestingly, Max Baker, who played Regano, like, I was thinking of having him as my secondary cast shout, because I also like felt the triumph in that moment when he shows up at the battlefield. I'm like, man, I like this guy. But then he had a moment, and I don't want to throw him under the bus in particular, but we've said enough about Jennifer Garner, so let's, use someone else as a scapegoat for a moment. The moment when he lost me, Max Baker, was when he comes on for his Greek messenger monologue near the very end, where he's the one who tells us what happened to Cyrano. That moment was so flat, and this is the climax. You're telling us that our protagonist has been murdered off stage, and that sure, he's going to come back on and we're going to get a sweet moment between him and Roxanne, but like, well, where was the energy and what kind of should be one of the most important moments, at least in the latter half of the play. And it was, so like, yeah, it made me hard to kind of like, as much as I enjoyed that character prior to and his portrayal thereof, you botched it up in what should be the most important moment. And I feel like every single cast member except for Kevin Kline had kind of a moment like that where they lost me, whether it happened earlier or later. Like some more than others, and some were just those kinds of moments, and maybe they had an odd glimmer of something more salient at one point. But like, yeah, it just, I get that it's a star vehicle and that you do, like, you know, the reason to see this, as we've said already and we'll probably continue to say later on, is to see it for Kevin Kline. But everyone else kind of needs to be bringing their A game as well. And I hope that this wasn't it for all of them. That I hope there's a more of an A game in there that maybe better directing could have brought out. Maybe if one of them was playing the star, they would have like tried harder or done something different. But yeah, it just, the cast itself certainly was my weakest element. Yeah. Sorry, Bridget, you had a point. Yeah.
I just want to go back to what you're talking about with the oregano at the end. Messenger parts are difficult. There's basically two ways to do it, and that is when you reenact it or tell the story, that you are reliving it again emotionally and telling people, or you just those are the facts, ma'am, and you just report them. But it seemed like, he hadn't. I think it's about a visual thing. Like he was not actually seeing the pictures that I was seeing of Cyrano coming out of his house, going down the alley, seeing that log. Like, if the actor's actually seeing all of those images again, the actor will have different ways of saying it, but he didn't execute something that was pretty basic. And I think that's probably the disconnect there, was that he wasn't actually seeing what he needed to be describing for us.
Hit the nail on the head right there, because something was missing. And
hit the log on the head right there.
To say hit the log on the head.
So,
Well, I mean, let's get into the last bit of our production discussion here, which is, do we think this production is worth the watching? Ryan, as our resident TA, would this end up on the syllabus for watching material?
I don't know why you think TAs write the syllabus. Like, you ask me this every time. So this is a very straightforward version, I'll say, which I think is odd, because the guy who wrote this brilliant little book wrote the translation, Anthony Burgess, Clockwork Orange fame. And that's, when I saw his name in the credits there, I was like, because it was in the opening credits, not in the end, I'm like, okay, interesting. Like, this is the kind of guy who invents his own languages to tell stories about like a violent, youth culture and, government oversight and surveillance, and like really like rich, meaty material. And I guess I don't know, that's probably my own fault for bringing those like expectations into it, but like, this is a straightforward Cyrano. Like, sure, there's a lot of the acting we've talked about is uneven, and the directing didn't necessarily pull it all together, but it's fine. It's good. If you want to watch a Cyrano, this is a Cyrano. It's one that exists online. It has a great like leading role in Kevin Kline. And, I don't know how many more times we can say it, that he is the reason to watch this version. But Cyrano, the character, for the most part, is the reason to watch or read or engage with the story of Cyrano anyway. So yeah, you might not enjoy everything about it, but I think certainly from the educational perspective that you insist upon me using as the framework for answering this question every single time, yeah, if you're studying Cyrano, sure, this is a fine one to watch. I didn't see it, but National Theatre did a recent one with James McAvoy that I know like a lot of people were really raving about. I think Martin Crimp wrote the adaptation for that. So, and like I don't know enough about that production, but I feel like, hopefully they put it on their streaming service soon, the NT at Home, and maybe we can
We'll bring this panel back together for another Cyrano discussion.
Because that, to me, at least, like what I read and saw about it at the time, like looked like a bold reimagining of the Cyrano story. And
big nose.
Yeah, so I think this is what we watched was a fine standard Cyrano. But Bridget, you've seen 2 previous versions of this. There have been countless others. I get that this production itself is like 13 years old now, but I feel like I'm kind of over standard Cyrano. I think this is a rich, meaty piece that probably has a lot that you can do with it. And this production is a great introduction to Cyrano. And I think, Jill, you can maybe attest to that more than I can, since this was your introduction to Cyrano. And certainly at Bridget, you talked about how, spoon-fed you felt the opening sequence was. And like, this does seem like it was designed to be your first Cyrano. And if you don't know anything about the story before, don't worry, we'll hold your hand and walk you through it and look at how amazing the actor we got to play the lead is. But yeah, I'd like to think that like this is just like one notch down from Shakespeare in terms of oversaturated, overdone play. That it's not Shakespeare, but it kind of might as well be in terms of how often it's produced, and large repertory companies are kind of always going to do it until the sun eventually explodes and we all die due to climate change. Sorry, bleak. But yeah, I just like we are seeing more and more avant-garde creative reimaginings of Shakespeare. I think Cyrano has to kind of be the next on the docket to do that, and National Theatre seems to have started that trend. Probably others that I'm not aware of have done it as well. But yeah, I want to see new, bold versions of this story. So as a TA, I would recommend this one. As you never seen Cyrano before, sure, watch this one. And good introduction, certainly.
For our podcast listeners, I was snapping when Ryan was saying time to see bolder takes on this classic. So, yeah, sorry.
Well, Jill, I mean, what were your thoughts? As this was your first Cyrano, would you want to go back and revisit it again?
I pretty much have the same spiel as Ryan. Like, I think, I like I said, I loved that Kevin Kline was my first face of Cyrano, because I was able to fully follow his journey and the plot. I think it's a great intro. The play is called Cyrano de Bergerac, so if you got a good Cyrano, then you're already halfway there. So, and it was a good, there was definitely moments or chunks that I think, as seeing this production as like a theater student or like a high school student or something, I think there's some good chunks to extrapolate and not kind of like analyze or do as like a scene study or something. Like, I think this production can provide some good baseline for that sort of work or analysis. But I'm with Ryan, and I'm this is just like a personal thing of mine. I just always love seeing like pieces done that the way they were written to be done, right? But then I also love seeing them sort of like modernized or just like put on in a different time period, or with a different flair, or different, just to kind of play with it. And like I said in the beginning of this discussion, I think the text of this piece does allow a broad stroke of playground material for actors, and I think that can arguably be said for the production too. Like, I think there's a playground there for stepping stones for kind of like playing around with sorry, I'm rambling. Bridget was saying how one version was the gender bent, right? Like the different genders were introduced to the piece, or I want to see this piece maybe done today, and like how would that change? Obviously, a lot of adapting would probably have to happen, but so yes, it is worth watching for the sheer fact of being introduced to a Cyrano and being kind of brought into the world with a decent Cyrano. But I would say test the waters and watch other Cyranos too. Don't marry yourself to this one. Yeah.
Fair. Bridget, what are your thoughts? Since you've watched this production now a few times, like, would you want to show it to anybody else, or is it kind of like you'd rather not revisit this ever again?
Oh, I don't know how many more are available online. So that's the problem, right? I will say that I watched the National Theatre production excerpts that people put on YouTube. There were the references had people drinking doubles. I wanted to definitely drink doubles. I can't imagine a worse way of doing Cyrano than what they did with the production.
Interesting.
But they rewrote it, obviously. Some of the comments I read were so I'm showing my age, but you take a play that is about poetry, that's about language, and you start dropping the F-bomb every second line, you're not doing play anymore. So my feelings about this is do your traditional Cyrano and then also do that Cyrano. Like create the context. Just doing one without the other is not the same thing. They will inform your experience in both of those productions. But I did not like what I saw from the National Theatre's production. That's not Cyrano to me. That doesn't mean it's not Cyrano. It's just not my version. And you have to explain to me why you've done what you've done. Because, or just not do Cyrano. It is what it is. It is a love letter. And it is about the language. And if you're not interested in those things, then don't come and see it, or we just shouldn't do it anymore. So yeah, I won't be rushing back to England to see that if they ever stage it. I was very confused by the excerpts. And also the nose, like you're right, he didn't have a nose.
We're going to talk about that for sure.
I also wonder, it's interesting because on stage, right, you think why do they always go this way? We go, well, maybe because if you're a poor actor and you have to sit in the stairs in the balcony, that's what you can see from that far away. But why has no one ever gone that way? I find that fascinating that they always go out.
Well, they do reference that's supposed to be like a in times we had, but like a pentanello. It's like that Commedia dell'arte, and that nose has a very particular, if I remember correctly, from the masks they wear. It does have that kind of phallic shape to it. So they do make reference to that's the nose's shape. But I would love to see a different type of nose.
Yeah, it's always these elongated, and it's interesting. And some of the, looking at the films in the last couple of weeks, I found the nostrils really fascinating. like how do they do that for the actors, that their nose is in there and they can still breathe and function and stuff. But I don't know. So that's where I'm at with adaptations and what's out there, what's available. But I think if you just want to see a really good performance of Cyrano, there's nothing wrong with Kevin Kline's. Yeah. I thought he was delightful.
Yeah, I mean, I will second everything that is said. I mean, you watch this for Kevin Kline. That is why you come and see this. You're not watching for Jennifer Garner. Sorry, Jennifer Garner. You're lovely in 13 going on 30, but
Well, like I feel like some people might watch this for Jennifer Garner because she's a big star and she has a fan base, but I feel like those people will be disappointed by what they saw, whereas Kevin Kline fans are not disappointed by
exactly.
his
Like
portrayal.
like Kevin Kline comes out of
You're
this
like, I
production
can
much
attest.
yeah. So I mean, like, yeah, you watch this for Kevin Kline, and he does earn your viewership because those great close-ups of him, you get his Cyrano full-heartedly. So watch this for Kevin Kline, but if you want to watch it for Jennifer Garner, go right on ahead. You just, after listening to this review, you may question whether or not it's worth the time if you're focusing just on her, but enough said on that. Okay, so, all right, so now let's get into some play-based, text-based questions, because, you know, we like to do that. We like to talk about production. We also like to talk about the play itself. There's a lot of good, meaty material for us to get into. So the first question is, could you view Cyrano's predicament as the perpetual nice guy as being akin to a modern-day incel? Does this make him a sympathetic character from a contemporary perspective? Jill, what are your thoughts?
I knew you were going to come to me first.
I could see you dreading it and averting my gaze. So I was like, clearly Jill's got something to say.
Okay, I'll start, but I definitely will be talking and commenting on other people's responses in this probably, because this is a very interesting question for me. I do not think he is compared to a modern day incel at all. And maybe it is because I'm tainted, right? I've never read Cyrano. I've only seen Kevin Kline's portrayal of Cyrano. And I absolutely think the charisma and like confidence and honesty that he brought to the character, I would not, he does not peg me as quote unquote incel. I'm sorry, I have the question pulled up because this question is just
Joe, you look like you're swallowing like a spoonful of Buckley's medicine, like just a sour face. I'm loving this.
I attribute the term incel to it's a very negative term for me. And so I don't.
A negative term for many people.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I think just like as a woman in the room, it's a very I'm not going to get into it, but I have so much compassion, and my heart goes out for Cyrano. I don't think he is I'm going to sit in the corner and boo-hoo, blame the world for my unhappiness. I think he knows. He knows his faults, but he also knows his strengths. And he still puts his heart into everything that he does, whether that be on the battlefield, whether that be with trying to tie Christian and Roxanne. Like, it's hard for us to watch because we know like his true heart really does love Roxanne. At least that's good old Kevin was doing that for me. But I don't think there's any like ill intent of like, maybe I'm not interpreting this question very well because this is a very sensitive topic for me, obviously. But does this still make him a sympathetic character from a contemporary perspective? Like, I guess I'm just going to end and say I do not think he is an incel at all. And I'm just going to pass the torch and probably comment on other people's things.
Bridget, what are your thoughts?
I think I feel as conflicted as Jill does because, generationally, I don't understand what this is, who incels are, except it seems to me that there is a willfulness to cause hurt and destruction, and to make society responsible for stuff they're not feeling, or
a lot of it is placed upon women too. Like, it's a misogynistic avenue. And I again, Bridget, you have way more experience with the character and other interpretations of Cyrano, but I don't get that out of Cyrano at all. Like, I don't get that quality from him.
No, I don't think that there's nothing in that play that would indicate that he's an incel. He does nothing destructive. It is all acts of love and sacrifice, and but that's my interpretation of incel.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem remotely what I assume they are. You know, like we can just, you know, say this in terms of timeline, that the gentleman in Toronto was just convicted.
Yes, correct.
The fact that his lawyer wanted to say that he was on the spectrum would dismiss him from his actions, and rightfully so. I don't. If he understood that what he was about to do would have ramifications on the individuals involved and their families, that seems willful to me. And there's nothing to indicate in the play of Cyrano that that's who Cyrano is. I don't, unless I'm misinterpreting the definition of incel.
Another like quality of like incel is they, you know, at least the brief I gave myself prior to this discussion is like, you know, oh, I'm not attractive enough, no woman will ever like me, therefore I'm blaming the woman, I'm blaming society for that. The character of Cyrano like has a large nose that is, you know, frowned upon in society, but the words that he speaks are, like we said, like packed with love, packed with confidence, packed with wit, packed with charisma. It doesn't gel with like the like malicious characteristics that follow, or the negative talk that like goes with what my sort of research on what an incel is. Yeah, I think Cyrano is far from an incel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ryan?
So this is something that, like, well, Meg, you and I wrote the questions together. And it is something that I think, like, to not jump ahead to you so fast, but it's the fact that it stood out to both of us, I think, is like, as something that like is an interesting avenue to review this playthrough, I think is interesting. Like, insofar as, like, if we're talking about bold reimaginings of this play and what can be done with it moving forward, I think this is a possible way that this play might speak to some element of our society today that wouldn't have been even conceived, like when it was first written and most previous productions. Because the fact that an entire online community has emerged based around this shared self-pitying view that because I can't get laid, it's women's fault, and you know, just toxic masculinity, like at its like worst, and certainly has led to some like ramifications. While I certainly don't, while I certainly don't think Cyrano himself exhibits the negative side of all of that. One, I think it can be up to the production, and if a production wanted to speak to this, you can kind of do it in either direction. That the play, you can have him behave like a contemporary incel and let the play be a condemnation of that, or something that I think is a little more concerning, and I don't even think you have to really bake this into the production itself, is that Cyrano has the potential of being what we might call like an incel folk hero. I know that term was in a lot of think pieces that people were writing about the Joaquin Phoenix Joker movie a couple years ago. That is this character, an incel folk hero that's, you know, kind of someone who fights the power and gives incels someone to look up to who represents them and their views. And while Cyrano himself certainly doesn't blame Roxanne, and, you know, he isn't like taking his anger out on her, he is like lovingly devoted to her. But I think if an incel is watching this, they could be like, Cyrano's obviously the coolest. He is the best person. He is so eloquent, such a cool swordsman. And what the hell is wrong with that bitch Roxanne that she doesn't see that just because of his nose? And he can kind of, I think, through this sort of warped perspective that I think many incels certainly have, they would see themselves in him as like, I too am clearly the best, the nice guy that nobody appreciates because I'm not so handsome. And yeah, I think he can be a bit of a beacon for that type of personality to latch onto and see themselves in, or at least see him as the ideal version of themselves. And I kind of think there is something sort of problematic about that he can galvanize this community in this way, even if it's not the intent and the character himself doesn't display those toxic elements. That audience isn't going to see those toxic elements in themselves. Jill,
I'm going to argue that because I think this play is based in love. I think this play is all about, like Bridget was saying, like, it's a love letter. There is an authenticity that comes from that. And I get what you're saying of how they can, in a warped way, interpret, like, hey, that's me. But, like, I don't think the text would support that sort of
I'm not saying it does either. But I think someone who's sympathetic to that view isn't a very good dramaturg, for lack of a better word, and isn't going to, they're going to see, like, I don't think the Joaquin Phoenix Joker movie necessarily speaks to that view either. If you actually kind of look at what the text is saying, I didn't love the movie myself. I thought it was just okay. But the fact that many incels saw themselves in that character, regardless of what the text is saying, that character shoots a talk show host in the face. Like, there are kind of like dangerous repercussions that can come from giving an idealized hero figure to a dangerous sector of the population.
But I will say, Ryan, based on something you said earlier, Cyrano, even though he should be the secondary character, is the primary character. So he's not the put upon. He's not the victim. He is Cyrano. He is the lead in this story. So, whereas I guess, with the Joker and with Cyrano, they would be considered the other, right? So I guess it depends on the story that's being told. But you're right. I don't know how they interpret those stories is interesting. But I don't know I can see how they would align themselves with Cyrano, but his actions would not support some of their thoughts or actions.
But I think they are deluded about themselves too. The fact, we put the words good guy in quotation marks in this question. And I think that because every incel thinks I'm the good guy. Girls only like jerks, the chads, the dumb jocks, and I am just a sensitive soul here. Why don't they love me? They don't love you because you're a misogynistic asshole, because of exactly what you're saying. Well, but because of the vision you have of yourself is so divorced from the way you actually are, and it's because you see yourself in this way is the problem. And Cyrano himself doesn't.
I hope they take like lessons from Cyrano. Like to any incels potentially watching, you can be like, yeah, sure, he doesn't get the girl, right? Like, but like I want to be Cyrano when I grow up. Like, that's the character that I want to be. Like, he's so confident. He's so suave. He's so genuine. Even like with the guys in the battlefield, with his cousin, with the freaking baker. Like, he can crack a joke. He's smart on his feet. He can he can get super serious. He's such a wide palette that like I refuse to have him be pigeonholed as this potential like incel hero, because he's not that at all. Like, but I'm not saying like, like, so basically, sure, take him as that, but take him as that as like lessons to learn, because he's not surface based, and from what we're talking about of like incels being like, I'm not this, I can't get that, and therefore I'm this. Like, Cyrano is not that. Cyrano is not a point A to point B to point C, and here we're at D, the end of the story. Like, he's a full palette of, he is like the most, like, I'm repeating myself, but like genuine and like human person in the story. And he is the other. And I think that's one of the beautiful things of this piece, is that it's showing that the other is okay, is the like, is what we should be looking up to.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you, Jill. And I do think like, yeah, Cyrano could represent a healthy model of masculinity that could maybe convert some incels, and like, but
Right.
I do feel that that's an interpretation, but I can just as easily see them taking the opposite about Roxanne is the worst because she doesn't appreciate how cool he is. And like, even if he's not saying that.
But I think she does, because I think there is, she may not be like, oh, I'm in love with you, but she always does make a point to notice that he's in the room and greet him and catch up with him
church.
And meets him, right? And then we get the backstory of the 15 years and how he visits her every week, and he's now sort of like his gossip bell for her. And I think she does genuinely care about him.
She
I think
does.
It's just not in the way that an incel would want her to care about him.
And well, that's the thing. Incels love there's a term that incels love, and that's friend zone. And it's such an awful thing to say, because you're so mad that this person who genuinely cares about you as a friend doesn't want to sleep with you. And like that, you know, it's really like, yeah, it's so effed up, like all this stuff that like, you know, people can have such views towards just an entire gender just based on, you know, their own self, like, you know, deprecating inadequacies. But that's the thing. Like, I completely agree with you, Jill, that the character doesn't invite this, but I can see people thrusting it upon him, and maybe an interesting deconstructionist take on who are the Cyranos of today, or the people who see themselves as being like a Cyrano when they so clearly aren't, could be a way of boldly reimagining this character today.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'll say, like, I agree. Like, Cyrano is a love letter character in the classic sense. However, I do think there is a direction you can take with this character. If you were to go more modern, you could go into this darker direction with this character, because there is a destructive quality about him, where other women are flirting with him, but he's pushing them off. Like the fact that during the battle, he's writing to Roxanne behind Christian's back, sowing the seeds of doubt within that relationship, that ultimately Christian decides, I gotta go die because clearly she's fallen in love with you and your letters, not me. Like, there is a destructive side that, if you wanted to direct it that way, not saying it is that way, but there is an interpretation that I think you can actually get into some really interesting things there. And Cyrano, like, he is a bit violent. Like, he is picking fights with these lords of the court. Just a bit.
He's a swordsman. He's a soldier. Of course, he's violent.
But it's the fact that he's picking fights with other men in the room, and the fact that in the first scene he kills a guy, like he stabs him and kills him. Like, there is, and the fact that he's mockingly doing it and he's being bravado and showing off. Like, I think there is a cocky.
As a woman in this room, though, that is not the story we want to be telling on our stages today. Like, I'm just going to straight out say that.
Well, that's why, like, I said deconstructionist, to like be condemning that type.
Interpretation does not need to be on our stages. Like, I get it. I get, like, talking about it and it being a thing, but I don't think we need to morph this classic, like, love piece into that story of, like,
yeah. Well, I mean, lens. Like, I'm just saying there's enough in the text that if a director did want to go in that direction, because, as you said, Jill, people are trying new things. Like, James McAvoy tried a version that had included swearing and no nose. Like, people are wanting to pick apart this text and try new things that I
think
could
there's
see
like
a director going
there's
that route.
others though, right? There's other others that you can put in place. And this might just be my opinion, but I think I can speak for at least a lot of women and young women. I don't think that this is the right sort of lens to kind of put forth.
All right, well, let's dive into a big obstacle, let's just say. Do we think Cyrano's nose is as big of an obstacle as he makes it out to be? Bridget, I'll let you start this one.
I don't think it's an obstacle, but sometimes we create things, we create a narrative that we're comfortable with. And, we can probably, most of us can come up with a whole list of things that we say, why would you be interested in me? I'm too short, my feet are too wide, my teeth don't match. Like, I think we all have those lists. And I don't know. I have met gentlemen and women with no hair, and men with big noses, and as they used to say, there's a Jack for every Jill. We don't say that anymore, Jill. There might be a Jill for Jill. But I don't know. It is an interesting thing that that became the obstacle of the play. It is fascinating, isn't it, that that they chose that as the centerpiece to this. Anyway, any good story has to have a protagonist and an antagonist, and I guess the nose is the antagonist in the story.
Yes.
And so the characters in the play, and we as an audience have to navigate that. So I think it's just really good storytelling, in my opinion.
Ryan?
So I have a complex answer to this, I guess, because from the perspective of his society that he lives in, he is discriminated against for his nose. It is the first thing anyone mentions when they talk about him, even though he is, like I've said it before, he's the coolest guy in this entire play, and he's just like good at everything he does. But what's the first thing anyone thinks of when they think of Cyrano? That big honking nose on his face. And like there's the scene with Christian like going at him, nose. Like, people will not let him forget that he has something slightly off about his face, despite everything else that are his assets. So I don't blame him as a character for kind of internalizing this discrimination and thinking, well, how could anybody love me? My nose is awful and grotesque, and it's all anyone wants to talk about. They don't see the real me. They only see the nose. And that said, it gets even more complex when we think about his, like, what, if we're talking about it as an obstacle, what is it an obstacle to? And the big thing that he wants is, requited love from Roxanne. And it's interesting when you think about, like, is it an obstacle to that? Because, maybe it is at first, because it's interesting. It's like, as I was thinking about this question, it's kind of interesting to think of both Roxanne and Cyrano kind of do display what I would call some superficial traits. Like, both of them do. And like Cyrano, for example, I'm kind of unclear what it is that he loves about Roxanne, because she's a very attractive lady, and they seem to be good friends, but they don't seem to have like a lot in common. They don't like, she seems to like look right past, the fact that like she's known him her whole life, and she hasn't fallen in love with him. Like he hasn't changed. He speaks the way he speaks, the way what he puts in those letters, what he said from under the balcony. And she only fell in love with it when it was in the vessel of Christian, a handsome guy with a normal sized nose. So she's, I think, certainly starts off at least with very superficial kind of qualities for that. And yet halfway through the play, she's scolding Christian for being so handsome that she almost wishes he was grotesque, because then she would know that this love was so pure, and the fact that he's so handsome detracts from how beautiful his verse is. So she kind of does a bit of a 180 there, but that's Cyrano. That's who she's known her whole life. And so like the fact that she doesn't connect those dots until she realizes that it was you writing those letters kind of seems strange. And like it's really weird that like Cyrano too has these superficial traits that like he's fallen in love with this image of her more so than I think he's actually fallen in love with her. And he behaves like Petrarch or like a medieval troubadour, that he's just so like sworn his love to this one person who he doesn't seem to actually have much of a relationship with, and he'll write her constant letters about how beautiful she is. And it's true that when we do like hear most of the letters that he writes, he's just complimenting her appearance in them. It's like rarely actually like speaking about what a perfect soul and personality she has. So superficiality in this play is important. So I do see the nose as probably having a lot to do with the fact that she doesn't recognize that this is the person I should be in love with, even though he speaks to her in person very similarly to he speaks through Christian in the letters. And we can maybe also, like, they are cousins. I don't know. I know like incest kind of at this time wouldn't have been as big a deal, like as far as obstacles go, but I think the big obstacle to him achieving that goal is the nose. And even when she has the revelation that, oh, you know, I don't care that you're attractive, Christian, you could be grotesque, you should be grotesque, she still kind of hangs on to, but he's perfect the way he is, this Christian. So yeah, but then in the end she does, you know, when she realizes that it was Cyrano writing that way, she doesn't have a problem with it. So it's interesting. There's like, I don't know if I'm making like a clear point here, but there's a lot going on in and around this nose that I think can't quite be simply put onto like, oh, it's not a big deal, Cyrano, don't even worry about it, she'll love you for you. Like, because it does play an important factor that I don't think can be, you know, just brushed aside that way. Like the McAvoy production, like, again, I didn't see it, but the fact that it was a big talking point about that is that he didn't have the big nose. And I do see that as like a conscious choice about how, you know, the real nose is like the one that's imprisoning you from the inside, that like maybe you look normal, but if people make you feel bad about something that isn't actually like overly exaggerated, you will internalize that and take that with you.
Or you put it upon yourself that,
yeah,
you know, you think that that's what society thinks of you when it's actually not. Yeah.
Yeah, you put up these walls for yourself. And I think that's interesting, like as an interpretation. Yeah, and it kind of makes the nose somewhat irrelevant whether or not it actually, as a piece of costuming, is there. But I don't think you can have Cyrano without the nose, whether or not it's physically manifested on stage, but the nose is part of who he is and part of the cross that he bears that prevents him from being happy.
Yeah. Jill, what are your thoughts on the nose?
Yeah, just to kind of cycle back to Ryan's comment too of like I kind of looked at it the way you did too, Ryan, of being interested in the fact that Roxanne sort of has that to an audience, or at least in Garner's performance, of like this change of event of like, oh, she actually doesn't care about the physical qualities. It actually is the word on the paper, the letter, the like heart of the piece that is getting at her, right? Because, you know, that the whole monologue she delivers to Christian of, you know, I want like be uglier kind of thing, right? But like in her defense too, I mean, like, again, this is maybe me not being as familiar with the text, but like, she, as far as she knows, like, she's getting those letters like from Christian, and I get what you're saying of like, how does she not know? It's clearly Cyrano's voice, like, he speaks to her that way. But like, to her defense, I don't even think her and Christian know each other very well, right?
Well, they don't.
And even like, exactly, at the end.
She's
so, like,
surprised at how uneloquent he is during the balcony scene, like, because you two haven't talked to each other yet. You're both very superficial this way.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think like a potential, because they're both so young, or supposed to be so young, there could just be that distance in, you know, your Shakespeare on the page, but then when you're in person, you're like you're the most awkward, sort of like sheepish person, right? So like that could possibly be how Roxanne perceives Christian, right? And as the audience, we know that it's Cyrano's words, but I think like I guess this is me supporting the character of Roxanne. I don't know if she doesn't know Christian enough to know that that's not his words, if that makes sense.
No, I think you're making a good point, but what I will kind of say to this, it's not so much, I guess, maybe I wasn't clear in this, that it's not so much that I think, how does she read these letters and not realize that it's Cyrano? She thinks they're coming from Christian. It's not impossible that Christian writes like this. But what does kind of bother me, I think, is she's known Cyrano her whole life. He talks that way to her. He behaves that way to her. And yet she doesn't fall in love with him, but she does when all of that personality and gusto is put in the machinery of an attractive guy with a normal sized nose.
I think part of what makes this would definitely be an argument thing too, of like, it could be yes or no, but Roxanne at the end of it, like, I genuinely think she does love Cyrano.
Oh,
like, when she pieces
100%.
it all together, I think that is love. And what makes it even more powerful is that, because I don't think she was physically attracted to him, and arguably ever. I don't think, I think she sees his soul, and like, she sees his heart, and we see that through his voice, through Christian, right? Unfortunately, but in that convent scene, that's like the true love that we're seeing. And so again, maybe it is an innocent thing, maybe it is a lack of experience thing, maybe it is like you're wrapped in your first crutch, you kind of have been told, or you're given this like god-like thing. But I think as you grow older, you realize, right, it's a person's innards, it's the person's inside that is beautiful, right? And I think she always, that's what's so interesting to go back and watch and analyze the text again, is I think she always knew that she loved Cyrano, but it wasn't like the love that society pegged upon her to feel, right? And then at the end you get like, oh, right. Like, yeah. Anyways, that was just
I think, well, it's certainly, it is the soul that she falls in love with. But yeah, it has to start with the infatuation before it can grow into love. And she's infatuated with Christian and not Cyrano. Like, the letter, like, is the perfect symbol for that. It's stained with Christian's blood, that's the body, and Cyrano's tear, that's the soul. And like,
soul,
and I love the final scene when she does kind of realize it. It reminds me of like my favorite scene in my favorite movie ever, and that's Charlie Chaplin's City Lights, where at the end the blind girl gets her eyes and realizes that she was in love with a tramp and recognizes him for the first time. And the love is still there, even if it's not the person she thought she was in love with. Right. And it can be very beautiful, very powerful. Like the flower petals that fall in that scene, the leaves are falling, the tears, and like, I don't know, like it can be very well done. And I think we're getting so far away from the question of the nose here.
Yeah,
but...
sorry. Well, I
want to let you guys go.
It's good discussion. But okay, so do I think that Cyrano's nose is as big as an obstacle? Okay, this is probably just, if we have engaged already from the conversation, I am a huge romantic, and I see the good in everything. I try to see the good in everything. I am an optimist. I am a ball of sunshine. I'm not apologizing, but to all my cynics out there, take me for what I am. I did not recognize his nose after the balcony scene at all. I honestly forgot it was there. Honestly. To be honest, from the fight scene, I was like, this isn't going to be that big of a deal, because like I said, he blasts in, totally takes over the space in physicality and owns the shit out of his text. Plays upon other, like, repartee up the wazoo, plays upon everyone else in the room. And the kicker for me, that I'm a huge fan of fight choreo, and this is another callback to Ryan's shout out, when he slices the guy's nose. And I'm like, yes, because your nose is barely there. Like, and he still got him on the nose.
Small
right?
target.
Like, he hit him on the nose, and it was a small target. Where, like, if he lost his nose, it would probably be like losing a limb. Or if he got caught on the nose, it'd be like losing a limb. So the fact that he snubs him in his sort of sticking point, and it's a smaller target, and it's just to kind of make his nose bleed, I'm like, this is my swear word, Mac. Fuck yeah, Cyrano. Like, just, yes. And then when people, and then it's from that, like, physical thing that when people bring up the nose thing, and again, maybe this is just Kevin Kline sort of doing the whole take it in, roll it off your back sort of approach to it, but he would just throw it right back, and no pun intended, in other people's faces. He was like, okay, yeah, my nose, great. What's your next point? Like, we get it. We get that I have this big appendage on my face. Can we move on? Like, and then, yeah, and then like Bridget was saying, that twist that happens with him in the balcony scene, it's all soul from there. Like, it's all the inside of Cyrano. Like, quite honestly, that like costume piece could have fallen off Kline's face, and I'd be like, oh, we're still watching Cyrano. He's not defined by his nose. So yeah, I'm probably just gonna end TED Talk there. But
Okay.
yeah.
I also want to add that we know the story, the background, which is that they grew up together, Cyrano and Roxanne. His nose would not be a surprise to her. Like, that would have been part of the environment. That would have been part of the relationship. So what's unfortunate is the timing, the fact that he saw her again, and they were young adults, and she starts to confess to love, and he assumes it's him. We also shouldn't, as an audience, not think that we know she's not talking about him, but why would he not think it was him? She's not freaked out by his.
Yeah, she never comments on his nose.
No, she never does. Yeah.
No, it's just, it's part of her history. It's part of her youth, right?
Yeah. I mean, like, I'll say for me, so this question actually hit me in a very personal, I didn't think it was going to hit me so personally, but it did, which was a really interesting interpretation. So I don't think his nose is as big of an obstacle. He makes the nose into his obstacle, not so much society. Like, society very much, like, the nose is there, and yes, it's a distinguishing feature, but a lot of people don't reference it in the way that he does. Like, he takes in a lot of the things and amplifies. For example, when he's with his buddies, nobody treats him any differently. The nose is just there. And for me, I took that in as me and my weight. For me, being a shorter person, under 5'5", I put on weight really easily. And I've used that as an excuse and a scapegoat to protect myself and guard myself from things. Where it's like, oh, well, you can't love me because I'm not the physical body type that Hollywood and societal standards have set. I'm too short. I'm a short guy. Most women don't want to date somebody a guy who is shorter than them. Like, there's something about that where it is.
We're getting real on this panel tonight, folks. Like,
we are,
but our hearts are out there.
It is.
Cyrano does that.
Cyrano does. But like, that's the thing about Cyrano, which is why I would love to see a production of Cyrano where you don't get the big prosthetic nose, but it is a little bit more of a subtle nose, because I do think that's something that we all fall into. Whether it's we look in the mirror and we see that one little bit, that one red blemish, and we think it's this mountain on our face. Meanwhile, we could go an entire dinner with somebody and they wouldn't even notice it. Right? It's those things of, like, we make those things bigger for ourselves as obstacles. And the fact that Roxanne doesn't, like, fall for him, I internalize it as it comes from him. because he
Yeah.
doesn't want to open up his heart and get hurt. So Roxanne
Well,
can't
and-
be faulted for not falling for him because she doesn't know. Like, why would you consider him? You've grown up together. You guys are friends. There is that genuine connection you two have with each other. So to make that a leap from friendship to romantic partner after you've known each other for so long, somebody has to make that intention clear. That, hey, I want to move in this direction. And Roxanne just doesn't know that. Cyrano never comes out fully. Never.
Oh my God, I'm sorry.
When
he's about to do it and then Christian's injured, he's like, I can never do it. I'm like, yes, you can do it.
I feel for him in that moment, and I think that is the wrong moment to do it. Like,
right, but like, you don't have to wait 15 years.
Yeah, he doesn't have to wait 15 years.
Bleeding,
but in that moment, we're like,
head.
oh no, Christian's dead and can't defend himself. By the way, I was the one who wrote all those letters.
Right,
like,
obviously,
that's shady.
Totally. But you know, in that moment, he's like, it's done, and I'm like, no, it is not done. It is just beginning. Again.
But once again, that's Cyrano using a scapegoat of this guy's death as a way to protect his heart. But yeah,
his nose.
Yeah, the nose. But yeah, back to the nose. Like, I think it's what we all do to ourselves, where we take some physical feature about ourselves and we embellish it and create a bigger problem create a bigger obstacle for ourselves that isn't necessarily there. Because I mean, I choose to believe that people are good and that we don't just look at physicality. We can see beyond something, or as I hope people form something that's beyond physical. But I think Cyrano does use his nose as a scapegoat for himself, that he can hide behind a nose.
Just to my point earlier, I don't think that comes out of nowhere, though. I don't think he's only doing it to himself. I don't think Roxanne does it to him, but people in his society do give him flack for it. And that he has then turned it into, well, if they hate it, clearly Roxanne must hate it too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think it's just something that like he has conjured up for himself to be insecure about. It comes from being discriminated against it for it.
Yeah, because even the way he kind of like rolls it off, like in one of the conversation he has with Lebré in that first scene when they're sitting down with the candlelight and he's like eating his grapes.
Yes.
That he just got.
Yeah. The one grape and the half a macaroon.
Yeah. And he's like, he just kind of, the way he says it, he's like, yeah, but you know, like this nose, and he like kind of like, it's almost like, to me, I think Cyrano is like this may be like very fantastical to say, but he seems like a character that is like ahead of his time in a way, and like that's just like one last branding of like society has on him. So it's like almost like a part of his checklist, unfortunately, that he has to like build. He doesn't want to, but he has to build it into his blueprint when he goes off for like a battle plan or like plan to woo a woman. He has to build in these like societal rules or like these societal like trigger points that have been placed upon him, and like and it's like in a way it like eats at him, but like not enough to sway his whole person, but it's just enough to halt his happiness in some moments, you know.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking for almost 3 hours.
This is like Mackers all over again. I almost said
yeah.
This is a theater space now, so okay.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into the final question of the night, which is: do you feel the play paints the characters of Roxanne and Christian in a favorable light? Could they be considered unwitting antagonists or agonists, depending on how Mac wrote the question, to Cyrano? Bridget, I'll let you start this one.
I don't see them as agonist or antagonistic. He's interesting because he says, you know, I'm just fulfilling the role that I've always fulfilled, which is the go-between. I don't think that I think he would have just gone on with his life. He would have been who he was. He had a life. He had a persona that he had created, defense mechanisms about his nose. It was just too young people, and the first one he was actually connected to, who asked him to do something in a role that he was very familiar with, which was the go-between. He was so I think that was a natural relationship that she asked him to do that. They would have found someone else. Surely to God, they would have had enough money and enough connections to have found someone else. But what's lovely is that she not only asked him to be the go-between, but she ultimately also had to ask him to spare Christian of the hazing that he was about to encounter, which I find really disturbing. That's probably the most disturbing aspect of the play. So I don't know. It's I don't think he asked for that that role. I think it was just a natural product of familial relationship.
Jill, what are your thoughts?
I think, like, we've talked about this a lot. Like, I think the characters have to, the three of them, like Roxanne, Christian, and Cyrano, have to kind of be, they operate as a package in a way. Like, they all impact each other positively or negatively. So, like, unfortunately, like, in a warped way, I think they can't be antagonists to Cyrano. Like, it's certainly not like Roxanne and Christian against Cyrano, because I think all of their stories wouldn't play out as they would if all of them weren't in each other's lives. You know, positively, like I said, positively or negatively, but not negative as in like antagonists. That doesn't make any sense. But they all need each other. I argue the characters would not exist without each other in their lives. So I don't know if that makes them antagonistic to Cyrano. That's my ramble.
Fair enough, Ryan.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how to answer this one because I think it is, again, it's complicated. Like I mentioned earlier, this was the question that I was going to save this for, but I jumped the gun earlier that in most other plays, certainly like classical pre-modern play, it's like go back to Roman comedy or Commedia dell'arte or even French neoclassical comedy, the era that this is set in, Cyrano would not be the protagonist. That Roxanne and Christian are our kind of breeding pair co-heroes that we're supposed to be rooting for, that the comedy ends by their sort of happy togetherness. And Cyrano is the cunning servant character, the Arlecchino, who breaks down the obstacles that face them. Usually those characters are the most amusing, the most memorable. Often they have the most stage time, but they're not the protagonists. They are a function of the protagonists wanting their plot. And I think what Rostand did with this play is he's like, well, what if that guy was the main character? And what if we saw things from his perspective? And like, I think if we do want to, like, he's in many ways, he's the antagonist in their story. Like, well, and I don't mean that in like a bad way. He's not the villain. Antagonist and villain are two very different things. But he is the obstacle to their love. He, in many ways, also facilitates them getting together, and he helps them along in that. But they cannot live happily ever after because Christian realizes that, oh my God, she should be with you, other guy. And everything kind of goes downhill from there. Christian can't, he has to like nobly sacrifice himself because he realizes I'm not the protagonist in this story. And in a way, like, if what I've just said is true, then the inverse must also be true. I think they kind of do act as antagonists to Cyrano because by casting him as the protagonist, their love or their attraction or to each other, their desire to be married in spite of him, does stand in the way of him getting what he wants and achieving his goal.
Mm-hmm.
But being the dapper, swell chap that he is, he gives himself a new goal. He does not actually spend this play, scheming and figuring out ways, how can I get Roxanne to notice and love me? He makes it his goal to help them in their pursuits, to distract what's his name in the tree scene, so that him so they can secretly get married inside the other room. Like, Cyrano does everything he can to prevent antagonism from happening within this little triad between them. And like, that's kind of beautiful and noble in a way. Like, this should be a Cyrano versus Christian story. Like, on paper, that's what, and Christian realizes eventually that's what it is, and that's why he makes the pretty selfless move that he does. But that's not actually the conflict of the play. The conflict is all inner conflict, and that, getting back to the nose is an inner, like Bridget, you said it very well before, the nose is the antagonist. Because the entire conflict is Cyrano wants X but knows he shouldn't, so he prevents himself from pursuing it. That's it's startling stuff. It's like really like clever, creative. Like, this play was written in 1895, I think, late
75.
1897, I think.
1897. Edmond Rostand.
Like the late 19th century, and like that, it's pretty it's more complex than like a play from the period it's set in would give us. And it's
I can attest to that, because I'm working on a digital restoration series right now. So
and those, like, to speak to the restoration period, like they're archly drawn characters. They might have psychological complexity, but the conflicts and plots don't match that. It's a very like black and white, you're the bad guy, you're the good guy, how are we going to get these people together? And I think what Rostand did so well is he realizes they're all people. That we might hate Christian because, I love Cyrano and Roxanne should be with him. But Christian's not a bad guy. Cyrano recognizes that. Christian recognizes that. Or else he wouldn't have sacrificed himself in the end for, maybe my new friend can find happiness with my wife. Like, that's like, you would never see that in a restoration play. Jeez.
He was brilliant in setting it in that time too, right? He made the De Guise character was the nephew of Richelieu, but he had he understood that French history. And he wrote it 200 years later, so he had all that history, and he was safe to write that kind of stuff. But I will also just go back and say that self-knowledge, I think that's also a big factor, is like I said before, the Christian realizing in the lightning before death, realizing who he was, and this is a play we have to accept as a play written about young people, and so we see them 15 years later, and I feel like Cyrano, when we meet him at the end, I think the scene set in autumn is about her autumn life. It's her in her autumn life. And Cyrano is in his death. He's in his winter. But I think he only knows who he is in his death. I think he is delusional about who he is, and he doesn't really know who he is until his dying moments, and that comes 15 years after Christian. So I think the play also is just about self-acknowledgement, value. So it'll be interesting. I will not be part of the panel discussing the National Theatre's Cyrano. I can't do it. I'm sorry. I'll say that now. It'll be interesting to hear if you have a discussion about that, because I'm, really trying to understand how we take these fabulous plays and, should we do them? How do we redo them? It's been great discussing all of these ideas and these themes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, for me, I think this play does have a nice, favorable light to Roxy Christian. Like, they're not just shallow characters. Like, they're not just surfacey characters. Like, they do have great depth of their own. Like, the fact that we've talked about, Christian acknowledges his shortcomings. He's willing, when he realizes what's happened, that he's willing to go charge the battlefield and die for the sake of giving Cyrano a chance. And Roxanne having that beautiful intuition moment at the end, Bridget, as you pointed out, of her discovering Cyrano's feelings for her, she has that moment of growth herself. So I don't think this play is ever like, these two are awful characters, shallow, empty-headed nothings. They are just as developed and have as much of an arc as Cyrano does. So I think the play does a really good job of that. And I wouldn't even consider them like unwitting antagonists or antagonists, because like Cyrano doesn't make Cyrano doesn't make his feelings known to Roxanne. So how can she like reciprocate something that she doesn't know is there? I mean, how many times have we had that where somebody said, "Oh, I really liked you more than a friend," and then it's like, "Oh, I wish I'd known that," because I mean, I had that in high school. Where it's like, "Oh, Mac, I wish I'd known that. Like, then maybe we could have explored that, but I don't feel that way. Like, and now I just want to be your friend." Like, you can't fault Roxanne for that. And the fact that Christian does realize that at the end, like, they're not opposing Cyrano. Cyrano kind of gets himself in the way, as you said, with the nose, with the way he views himself, that he kind of puts himself in the middleman position versus putting himself in the hero position. It's not their fault that that's the way that the cookie crumbled for Cyrano. And Cyrano takes it on the nose and kind of takes it and works with what he's given. Like it's not like he's out there, as Ryan says, like kind of doing like a Don John trying to break them up. He is helping, and taking his situation that he's put himself in and building it as best he can. So yeah, I don't think they're antagonist. I think the best Cyrano productions are the ones where all three of them have their strong arcs really brought to full light and giving Cyrano that good run for his money. That's not just, we love Cyrano, only Cyrano. We should love all three of these characters for their journeys. And we should feel horrible when Christian dies. And we should have a moment of, oh, Roxanne, repeatedly. And then also the moment at the end where it's like, okay, you got it. And it's sad that you're getting it now when it's too late. So, yeah, well, there we go, everybody. So before we go, though, let's all give our socials a bit of a plug. Jill, I'll let you start. Tell us what you're working on, where we can find you, all that good stuff.
Yes, people can find me Instagram, Jillian.Robinson96, my artist Instagram account. As I mentioned earlier in this panel a little bit, I am production manager and head of stage management for a digital restoration series with a North Carolina-based company right now. We've explored several restoration texts as audio dramas. We've done some one-off table reads with these texts. Right now, we've just finished The Bell Stratagem, which takes us about a century out from restoration, but inspired heavily by the Bow Stratagem and William Congreve's Love for Love, sorry. That's on the brain from earlier. And we will be doing a tragedy next. We're doing Venice Preserved is our next audio drama, so that's going to be super exciting. That's what I kind of have ongoing. And then on my artist account, you'll see posting several duets with some colleagues down the line, because I also dabble in musical theater. And
cool workouts you're doing?
Yes. Fitness and babies are my other passions. I nanny my niece and nephew alongside all the arts things I do. So, fitness classes and musical stuff, and I've been doing some shorts with Cup of Hemlock, which has been awesome. Peer Gynt and Miss Julie. I've had the privilege of dipping my feet in those waters, and that's been amazing as well. So bits and bobs all over the industry, and it's been keeping me busy in this digital hub while we kind of wait out till we can all physically be together in a space again.
Very true. Bridget, where can people find and follow you if they want to get in contact with you?
Around the river in Stratford.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You can find me there and follow me if you want to. You can talk to me if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm still really only on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing a lot. Yeah, I'm not doing a lot. I'm totally
That's okay.
unemployed, and just hanging in there.
Mm-hmm.
I will have. I wrote a adaptation of a YA novel, so I wrote a play, and it will have 8 readings this summer in Stratford.
Cool! Yay!
So if you find yourself in Stratford this summer.
Under the tent.
We'll see. I'm not. No, it's another company.
Oh.
No, it's a company called Here for Now.
Oh,
And they are presenting 8 new Canadian plays.
Great.
In Stratford this summer. And they are also doing play readings on Saturday and Sunday mornings. And I'm part of 8 of those mornings. So.
Cool.
Love that.
Not acting, not directing, but my play. So if you find yourself here in Stratford, that's other than around the river, that's what I'm doing.
Great.
Love it. Love it. Ryan, give us that classic send off and tell us about the Sonnet series.
Oh, right. The Sonnet series.
Yeah, it's still a thing.
Yeah, so still not active on social media, so just send all that love to Cup of Hemlock. It's the cups we're drinking from. It's where you can watch this very show. I directed Jill in those short scenes of Peer Gynt and Miss Julie, so give those a watch. And yeah, the Sonnet series, I apparently said it amusingly last time, so let me try to do that again. Cup of Hemlock is trying to get 154 performers together to each read one of Shakespeare's sonnets, so we get the entire whole sweep of them, which is daunting to say the least, because who knows that many actors? I certainly don't. Do you? Are you one of them? Would you like to join? Well, hey, go to the link in the description of this video, and maybe you too can read a sonnet for us. Tell us all about why some handsome youth should really start procreating already. That's what most of them are about.
I know. That's why I'm laughing.
No, seriously, we want people from all over the world, wherever you are, whoever you are watching this, get down to that link in the description, and we would love to have you participate with us. And you too can be the star of the show, Jazz Hands.
Ryan, love it. Perfect. And you can find and follow me at Mackenzie Horner on all social media platforms. Be sure to follow our podcast site now, so you can take COH Cup projects on the go with you, whether it's an interview like the one with Bridget, or if it is one of our reviews like our Merry Wives reviews, or our Bridget. Pericles, like also with Bridget, like all that good stuff. So you can definitely take all that with you on the new Cup of Hemlock podcast feed. You can follow my own personal podcast, Before the Downbeat, on all listening platforms as well. As of this recording, we have just released our episode about the musical Ragtime, which is an epic turn-of-the-century musical, and we will have just announced that the next one coming up is South Pacific. Stay tuned for that. But for now, everybody, thank you so much for listening and watching. We will see you all with our next bit of our Kevin Kline month dedication very soon. Thank you and have a great evening. Bye-bye. Au revoir.